Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Lillian Cheesman of Milwaukee is a Democrat running in the 15th Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Lillian, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you for having me.
As a first-time candidate, what do you consider the biggest issue in your campaign?
Well, the number one thing I'm hearing from people in the community is the need for better healthcare system.
Healthcare.
Yes.
And so what changes would you work for as a member of the Assembly if you're elected?
Well, so number one, I would expand Badger Care, make it something everybody can buy into. One of the problems that I'm hearing about when I'm talking to people in the community is that so if you have Badger Care, that means that you're low income. It's like 200% above the poverty line. And what happens is when people get a job, maybe the first job, or maybe they've gotten a second job, maybe they're both part-time, or if you're getting a raise, suddenly you make just a little too much above that 200% poverty line, and you're kicked off of Badger Care. And so people in the district are actually facing this choice of, do I keep access to my doctors and to my medication, or do I accept this job, do I accept this raise? And that's a really difficult choice for our families to be facing, and there has to be a better way. And so if everybody can buy into Badger Care regardless of income, if we maybe have more of a grace period on Badger Care so that you're not kicked off the minute you're making just a little bit over that line. Those are some simple steps that would make a huge difference to a lot of people. And
would this make a difference both in the urban and rural areas of Wisconsin?
I think so, yes. I mean, our farmers are struggling. Our suburban, just because you're living in the suburbs doesn't mean that you're raking it in. I mean, there are people in the suburbs that are struggling just as much as in the more urban parts of the district.
Does state government have a role in retaining and recruiting doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals?
I think that's an interesting idea. I'm not sure I would go so far as to say that the state has an obligation to or requirement, but if that's an option, if that's a way to solve this problem, because we do have a bit of a doctor and nurse shortage, I think that's something we should explore. We should see if that's something that would make sense for our community.
State government and Delta Dental now partner in a program that provides dental care in some low-income areas. Should that be a priority in the next Medicaid budget?
I think so, yes. And again, not just limiting it to low-income areas, because again, we've got a lot of people who they're just a little bit above that low-income mark, and they are being left behind. They don't have the resources to buy insurance plans on the private market. We need to help those people as well.
As you talk to residents of the 15th District, do any of them talk about the issue of caregivers? AARP estimates that there are 578,000 caregivers providing care for a family member or a neighbor or someone. Do we need any new law or regulation that would require hospitals to recognize caregivers in a new way?
I think that's something we should look into. My mom, who is 75 years old, she lives with us, and so I am a caregiver. I do take care of her, and it's required some adjustments in my life and in my fiance's life, but it's something we're happy to do. But it would be good to have a little bit more assistance from the state to make our family just work a little bit easier.
The gridlock in the Capitol on how we pay for highways and bridges and maintenance and construction. How would you like that impasse resolved?
I'd like to look at the bidding process, actually. Because what I'm seeing is that there's something fundamentally wrong with our bidding process. We must have some bad faith bidders or something, because projects keep going over budget and over time. And we need to look at if there need to be an increase. Are there any penalties for going over budget, going over time? And if there are, then they need to be enforced better. If there aren't, we need to figure out a fair way to make bidders be responsible in their bidding, right? Like, we need to have clear expectations. And with how many road problems we've been having, with the freeway project that took forever, and frankly, I don't even know if it's for example, the Lincoln Avenue exit ramp was just finished, already has a pothole in it. So, I mean, we need a bit more oversight, and we need to hold our construction workers and the contractors more accountable.
Do we need to do that before we raise the gas tax or the registration fee or tolling? Do you have a position on tolling?
Well, so for your first question, I don't want to say. We need to figure out where exactly this problem is coming from before we can decide for sure what the best solution is. We need to make sure that we are funding our roads, but I think toll roads are a bad idea. I think the example we see in a lot of other states demonstrate that toll road funds end up getting rated for lots of other things. They end up not getting dedicated to the roads the way they were originally intended. And so I'm very cautious about the idea of instituting toll roads when there are other options that we could be exploring.
State government has imposed levy limits on local governments for about 14 years.
Yeah.
Some local officials say that hurts their ability to provide local services.
Yeah.
Keep levy limits, loosen them, or get rid of them?
I'd definitely be in favor of loosening them, possibly getting rid of them entirely. What we have going on is, municipalities are limited. They can only raise their property taxes if there's new construction, which means there's incentive for wasteful new construction. We have in West Allis, we have empty storefronts that I had wondered for years. Why are we building new things when we've got all these empty storefronts? Well, now I understand why. It's because it's the only way for the city to raise its property taxes. And that's wasteful. Like we should be focusing on renovating old buildings and using what we have before we spend a lot of money on building new. So frankly, I don't know why the levy limit came into existence in the first place. Whatever good intentions there might have been, it hasn't worked out well for most of our communities.
In light of the potential tax benefits, tax breaks for Foxconn, and now Kimberly-Clark wants their own,
Yeah.
what should be the criteria? When should state government give these kind of tax breaks to private companies?
It's not so much the tax breaks, it's the way we were rushed into this deal with Foxconn. I don't think that anybody has had a good opportunity to really evaluate the costs and benefits of getting into business with Foxconn. And I think that's where a lot of my concern is focused. Maybe it is a great deal, but I think we don't know enough about the particulars, and frankly, Foxconn hasn't had the greatest track record in other areas where they've proposed similar deals. And so that's my major concern. And so I believe strongly in always doing a very thorough cost-benefit analysis, making sure that the community is getting what it's paying for out of this. And I just don't know that we're having that with Foxconn. And I don't blame Kimberly-Clark for being, wanting to get, they've been here for years. Why shouldn't they get a nice deal if this new company that has no track record in Wisconsin, they're getting this huge benefit? And I could see it leading to some real animosity between different companies in our community. And I don't think that's good for anybody.
The current state budget has a pretty hefty increase in state K-12 aid to our public schools.
Sure.
Are you hearing from local school superintendents and administrators that we need another similar big increase in state aid for public schools in the next budget?
Yeah, it's nice that we're now finally getting some increase in aid. The problem is we're still at a net deficit from where those cuts, somebody takes $10 from you, right, and then gives you back $2 later. Well, it's great, but you're still missing the $8, right? We're still at a deficit from where our education spending was 8-10 years ago. And so, our communities are really worried. There are schools in New Berlin that are likely to close. In West Allis, I know there's a concern about how low the reimbursement rate is for special needs kids, and so they're not able to have staffing because they're not getting reimbursed from the state at a sustainable level. And so those are some serious problems that are affecting our K through 12 education. And this district is full of families that have kids going to school, and it's a real concern.
Part of the debate on K-12 is the growth of the voucher and the choice program.
Yeah.
This has grown from Milwaukee to Racine, now statewide. Do you have a position on the voucher program and whether it should be expanded further?
Yeah, I disagree with the voucher program. I think
Would you put it out of business?
I would do it as a phase out, or alternatively impose the same sorts of accountability on the charter schools that we have in public schools. Problem we've got right now is that almost anybody can start up a charter school, start taking taxpayer money, taking on students, but there's no accountability and there's no guarantee that that school will continue to exist for the next several years. And so you can have a school that halfway through the school year closes shop. Owners could go bankrupt, so they've gotten paid, they take their money, possibly out of state, and now your kids, they have to go back to the public school, which we chose not to fund because we sent all that money to the people who took it out of the state. And so they've probably gone bankrupt, so now we're paying the bills for the bankruptcy. So we just paid 3 times for your child's bad education. And that doesn't make sense. We need to be investing once in good public schools. I support parents having choices, but we need to protect parents from, we need to make these schools accountable.
Some of the Democratic candidates in the recent primary said we should get to a point where we cut our prison population in half. Now, part of this debate is we have 2 prisons built in the 1800s, but a big question for the next budget is, do we need a new state prison? Do we?
You know, I've been a prosecutor and I work now as a defense attorney, and so the criminal justice system there are so many nuances in it for me. It's hard to say yes or no. Do we need a new prison? I'm concerned about the quality of the prisons we have. As you say, some of them are built a long time ago. So if we do build a new prison, I'd like us to see closing 2. Like build 1, but close 2. But that has to do with making sure that we have humane conditions in the prison. What I'm more concerned about is the fact that we are underfunding our our assistant district attorneys, our district attorney's office, and our public defender's office. As you're probably aware, recently in Wood County, a young man hung himself after a preliminary hearing in which he didn't have a defense attorney. And the reason he didn't is because it's really hard for the public defender's office to hire private bar attorneys to take on these cases. We are the lowest compensated public defense contractors in the nation at $40 an hour. That's not enough to pay most attorneys' overhead. And so this young man, he had to go through a stressful criminal hearing. He had no one to advocate for him, no one to tell him that it was going to be okay, and he hung himself in his jail cell that evening. And that is more concerning to me than this issue about whether or not we're building a new prison.
Given your experience in the criminal justice system, this follow-up question, what could be done about Wisconsin having the highest incarceration rate for African Americans?
You know, we need to improve our economic opportunities for people across Wisconsin, but especially in some of our trouble zip codes like the 53206. Because I'm a criminal defense attorney. I represent a lot of people, and what I've discovered is when people are struggling economically, they make bad choices. And when you start making enough bad choices, you end up getting caught up in the criminal justice system and you make worse choices, and that's how you end up with a high prison population. The reason we have, in my opinion, the reason we have so many people in prison right now is because people are struggling and they're desperate and they're making bad choices. So we need to address those economic factors first, and the rest, it'll take care of itself.
Part of this debate involves the bills in the Capitol that would legalize both recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. Your positions?
All right, let me talk to you about catnip. A number of years ago, I had heard this story about a woman. She gets a big bag of catnip. She goes to work. She comes home. She found her cat had eaten all of it, was rolling around in it. She freaks out. She's scared. She calls the vet. Oh my gosh, vet, what do I do? Do I need to bring my cat in? Stomach pumped, whatever. The vet just laughs at her. Says, have you ever heard of someone ODing on marijuana? She says, well, no. Yeah, your cat's fine. So for me, marijuana is human catnip. It's not nearly as dangerous as alcohol, which is attributed to lead to 88,000 deaths nationally per year. Mm-hmm. And yet, alcohol is still legal. We regulate it, we tax it. We should be doing the same for marijuana. So that's my position. Let's legalize human catnip.
UW system budget, continue the freeze on resident undergrad tuition or end it?
Sorry, could you say that again?
We've frozen resident undergrad tuition
Right.
in the UW system for 6 years. The governor wants it to go for a 7th and 8th year.
Right.
Have you thought about the position of?
I have. I'm a UW grad, both undergrad and law school. I appreciate the tuition freeze. Our students are paying a lot to get an education, and so we need to provide them relief. But the problem is this tuition freeze is starving the UW system of money, and at the same time, the state isn't contributing to the UW schools the way it used to. And so, I mean, removing the tuition freeze, that may help the students, but it doesn't help the university. The universities continue to provide a world-class education, and so I would lift the tuition freeze, but then I would also restore and maybe increase the funding so that we don't have to raise the tuition, because people shouldn't be going $100,000, $200,000 into debt in order to get a good education. So we need to address that.
Then the final question, you're challenging a Republican incumbent. Do you want to highlight differences between you and the incumbent?
Sure, I was going to give a snarky response, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to.
Okay.
No matter who's in the governor's mansion or who has control of the assembly or senate, I won't be a rubber stamp for anyone. And I think that's actually the biggest contrast.
Okay, thank you. Lillian Cheesman of Milwaukee is a Democratic candidate in the 15th Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Lillian, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.